Welcome to the Know, Grow, and Scale podcast, where I, Laura Johns, founder and CEO of The Business Growers, interview business leaders to uncover secrets of how to know, grow, and scale their organizations effectively. Today on the podcast, I have Randy Brogle, CEO of LS Networks. Let's get started with today's episode. Thank you, Randy, for being on the podcast today. LS Networks is a team of wonderful people, and you are somewhat new to the company, but not necessarily new to the industry. So I'm excited to talk about all your experience and what you've brought to the table at LS Networks. So if you don't mind, give me just a brief snapshot of your role at LS Networks and kind of a little bit about what your day-to-day looks like before we get into your background.
Sure. Well, I am the CEO of LS Networks. I started August 1st. So I am less than 6 months into my tenure, and I think from a day-to-day, when you're with a small ISP, a small company of any kind, your day-to-day still winds up being wearing many different hats. There's a lot of different activities and things going on, and depending on what the situation is, you can get pulled in many different directions on any given day that you hadn't necessarily planned for. So part of that I think is being new as well. So, some of these are good opportunities for me to learn different parts of the business and get to know the people a little better. So I think that's part of that in this current, call it 6 month ramp up phase.
So your day-to-day today looks different than what it might look like if I interview you a year from now. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, I would hope so.
Yeah.
We'll get to a little better, just anytime there's change, getting into a good cadence, a good rhythm. Having all the right, I have a lot of the background and knowledge, so I don't have to ask quite as many questions about every single detail that comes up.
Right. Okay, so how did you get in this industry? Can we talk a little bit about your background? You're based in Denver now, but spend your work week in Portland, where LS Networks is headquartered. So you do a little traveling, but I'd love to hear kind of your journey to in the industry, engineer background, correct? I want to make sure I say yes. I don't want to label you as an engineer, but talk a little bit about your background and how you got in this industry.
Yeah, well, honestly, ever since I was a little kid, I dreamed about being the CEO of a mid-sized ISP in the Pacific Northwest.
Right. Doesn't everybody? Yeah.
No, I think like most people, my story has lots of twists and turns. I didn't spend time envisioning this specific role and this path and how to get there. And I think what I find, everyone's journey is unique based on their specific background experiences. Often people wind up I'll call it the same endpoint or in the same general area, but they just have such unique, diverse backgrounds there. So, I think in 2022, there was this perfect convergence of our LS Networks, mission is to bridge the digital divide by bringing better internet to small towns in the Pacific Northwest. I personally realized about 5 years ago that, my life's calling is to really help improve people's lives by bringing better internet to underserved communities. And, LS needed a CEO, and I was looking for ways to focus more on my mission, and so it was just a good alignment. But I think jumping backwards a little bit, when I graduated with my engineering degree, I had 2 job offers, and both of them actually happened to be in telecom. And I decided I took a job with a company called MFS and their engineering construction group. That was back in 1994 with I'll call it the initial growth of the first commercial fiber networks. So it was really good timing, and I was able to be exposed to many areas of not just, this business as it grew and expanded, but building the fiber networks, but also working with sales and financial teams to really understand multiple aspects of the business, and really had various twists and turns from there, but it's all really been around telecom and other components. Over the years, I worked for people I've worked for a broad range of people. I think some of them only had a high school education, and I worked for other people who had a Harvard MBA. There's been times where I've had offices that were in warehouses or even in trailers. And I've had offices in some of the fanciest buildings or tallest buildings in cities, or these really great campuses. So, I think as I talk about what led me here, I think it's more about learning and growing from every person, in your life that your path crosses with. It's about taking advantage of every experience and finding the lessons that help you grow as a person and a leader, from each situation you have. They're all different. It's about what you take from it and how you leverage that going forward. So if I think about, kind of what are the core elements along that path, I think that help get me to where I am. I think the biggest one would be, I think it's about basically taking on any role, to help the team to be successful. Some I've done very willingly, and sometimes not so much on some of the roles and opportunities, but it's, willing to help the team out. A couple others I think is like, do what you say. Many a time I found myself up at 2 a.m, kicking myself for committing to deliver something by the next day. So I've learned.
I share those moments as well. I'm the same way.
Yeah, but learning not to overpromise on deadlines, but also still meeting the deadlines that I set.
Right.
And then I think a big one I'm a fan of is no surprises, especially on bad news. It's good to flag issues early and run towards them rather than away from them. Putting out a fire when it's a small embers is a little easier than when it's grown and gotten significantly larger.
Right.
And I guess the last one is just being kind and respectful. I've worked in some pretty intense work environments. I've worked for some that are more collaborative. And I think today's day and age, those attributes are often discounted or overlooked. So we can still hold ourselves and others to high standards. We can still hold people accountable when they don't execute. We just need to think about, treating people as humans and being respectful and polite along the way.
It's kind of interesting in corporate America how good old-fashioned kindness seems to be a lost art sometimes. And I think that having that as kind of a mantra professionally is something that we could all benefit from. So, and I've been able to experience that. You're very kind in the few short months that I've known you. So I thank you for that.
Thank you.
So this industry is very unique, and I've seen it kind of from a different perspective as you. I've never been building anything. You don't want me building anything. But one thing I love particularly about the industry is that you can never learn enough. I remember my first job was working for a company that put a cellular module inside an electric meter. So the first few weeks that I was there, everyone was spinning was the chit chat or whatever around my desk was all these abbreviations that I was supposed to know, so I was just writing down everything and then, Googling it or whatever later. So, that learning that, or the fact that the industry's always got new things is really interesting. Is there anything particularly, and that might be it for you too, but what makes this industry something, an industry that you want to stay in? You could probably go do a lot of different things with your background and degree, but what do you, find most compelling or exciting about telecommunications?
Yeah. Well, and to be honest, there's been a few times in my career where I had no desire to be in the telecom industry any longer. It's a tough business, and it's gone through some interesting boom bust cycles since I entered it in 1994. So I can't say I've always been 100% no, I'm definitely in telecom. Yeah. Telecom is awesome. I think technology has always excited me, and I've wanted to be close to that. But I've wound up staying in telecom, and now, frankly, I would never think about leaving it. And I think when you think about what we do, and I say we, I mean collectively people in the telecom industry, whether they're equipment vendors, making the devices, the service providers, various carriers, it's a whole ecosystem. But, people have really, telephones have been literally a lifeline for people in industries over many, many, many years. And now sort of that's been replaced to some degree by what I'll call our digital lives. And they're more dependent than ever on staying connected. And that's not just, it is literally the lifeline aspects of it, where it's healthcare and monitoring and access, with cell towers, being able to make 911 calls and respond, or use cell towers to track people's locations to help save them. But also the business growth and the educational opportunities and so many other things that we're all just, keeping people connected is critical. And so I've had the good fortune of working on projects in the past where, our network was a key part of providing emergency support after hurricanes or flooding or other disasters, on that basis. And you see these things on the news and you're like, hey, I helped put in those cell towers. I helped run fiber to those things that were helping save people's lives. And so that's things that, come up and remind you. But I think every day, day in and day out, it's just highly satisfying to know what we do. I mean, at LS Networks, we keep cell towers, hospitals, schools, government agencies, as well as a lot of businesses all connected and functioning. And that's a core fabric of our lives. And so to me, that's why I want to be a part of this industry and help make sure everyone, even in rural communities, has a chance to take advantage of that.
Well, and truthfully, if you think about it, some may disagree, but that's what allows communities in the Pacific Northwest and all over the country to be sustainable. I mean, if you don't have that resource, you lose your ability to grow and thrive as a community. So I think and I've seen that just in our work with you guys. So that's really,
And I've even seen examples of, you think about a lot of, especially in the beautiful Pacific Northwest, now that I'm putting a plug in, but there's a lot of tourism here.
Yeah.
And so these people want to come to very rural areas to enjoy the outdoors and nature.
Yeah.
But they want to stay connected.
Right.
And so they need to have strong internet connectivity in order to draw in their clientele. But at the same time, they need to be able to respond and have their web page up and functioning,
right,
and get their emails and be able to respond to requests in a timely fashion, or chats or texts.
Right.
Texts.
Yeah. And years ago, you had to trade. It was a trade-off. If we're going to go up to the mountains, we're going to lose our we're going to lose our service, we're going to lose our internet. So, and now it doesn't have to be that way, which is exciting.
Right. Although sometimes it's good. It might be good when it's
I know.
that way.
Is it a good or bad thing? So, let's talk about the future of fiber internet. And you're, as a leader in the telecom space, and with your experience, the next 5 to 10 years, what do you see? And for LS Networks, but for the industry alike, what do you see coming around the corner? What are you hearing? What are the things that we have to look forward to in terms of advancement in the industry?
Yeah, well, I think I can boil it down to one word, and that's the metaverse.
Oh, yeah. Let's talk about it. You would know.
Yeah. I worked for a company that changed its name to Meta. It was so important. But I think many people, metaverse has become the buzzword. It's, replaced cloud or back in the day, even dating myself, it was VoIP.
Yeah.
And these are all the phrases people threw out that were the buzzwords. So it's become a bit of a buzzword. And I think because of that, it's not fully understood by people. What exactly does it mean? And in this case, I think it's actually kind of good because no one really knows what it means. Meaning, what is the metaverse going to look like in the future? And to me, it's about what does it look like when it grows up. It's in its nascent stages now. And while Meta changed its name to Metaverse, the Metaverse is really, again, an ecosystem of many different companies, content companies, service providers, equipment providers, just so many components that will come and help dictate what the metaverse really looks like. But to me, the metaverse is just the next evolution of the internet. It's a change and evolved over the years from the early days with the text-only messages to the first web pages to now you think about the e-commerce on there, all the apps and things like that. So really, the metaverse is just a fancy name of talking about how we get a little more immersed in the collaboration and the interactions with others, and it's part of that. I think it's you have this convergence of these faster internet speeds, but also like faster graphics and processing on devices, and people's real desire for immersive interactions with other humans. And I think the pandemic has probably helped accelerate some of that adoption and realizing, they were doing a lot more video interaction. I think people found it less than fulfilling in terms of meeting some of their core human needs. And so the question is, can the metaverse, or those types of applications help provide that personal interaction and connections that we as humans, as social beings, crave and need? And can the metaverse deliver on that, or does it still leave us a bit empty and hollow at the end of that?
Yeah. Think about just how far we've come since I was a kid. I've got a 6-year-old, that we've talked about before, and he, it's I think normal for his age and generation, and maybe he shouldn't have an iPad, but he does, But I think about what the standard of technology that he has in just 6 years come to expect. And I wonder what that's going to look like when he has a 6-year-old, because I've seen I've seen, and we had the water game that you could like push the buttons and the water would make the little thing shoot up, or we had the pin and the magnet where you drew the mustache on the guy in the car. Those were our car things that we could play with on a trip. And now he's 6 and he's got his iPad and Wi-Fi in the car. And, I just think about what, which by the way is a savior on, 8-hour trips. But I just think about what's to come, like what's that going to look like in a couple of years, or when he has.
Well, and what we see today that we're struggling with. I don't want to go off too much on a tangent on very social issues, but you think about some of the things you read and hear about with social media and some of the negative aspects of it. But there's so many things. If you go back to some of the earliest technology and call it the television or the telephone. And as we've seen the growth and adoption of those, these have all caused various challenges and shifts and changes in how our society thinks about our norms, our standards, how we interact. And what's happening is it's the pace of innovation is accelerating.
Yep.
If you look at the time gap between these new launches and things, going back again to the early 1900s to today.
Yeah.
Huge acceleration in that. And so I think it's the humans, both ability to adapt and change some of our core psychological functions and things along those lines. I'm paraphrasing what I've read and heard from others.
Yeah.
So there's lots of good content out there and discussions that people have done a pretty good analysis of that.
Yeah.
But I think it's interesting. So that's just part of the curve we're on, and the metaverse.
Yeah.
Is the next phase of that.
Yeah. Well, if you think about, not to derail us too much, but if you think about what, you think about the pandemic, and there have already been, there's already been research that shows the, mental health challenges that resulted. What if we had not had the ability to connect with others in, another form? Because thankfully, I had a newborn at home. We had the ability to FaceTime our family and, do some of these things that had we not had that, I think we would have been in way worse shape. So I'm thankful for connectivity. And with all the bad, I guess I'm saying that there's so much good that has come from it too. So.
Well, I think like everything in our lives and our world, it's it's neither good nor bad. It's just how we leverage it and use it.
That's right.
There's two sides to every coin.
That's right. So we know that LS Networks is really making a name for themselves in the Pacific Northwest in terms of fiber internet. Excuse me, I said fiber like a real Southern gal that I am. Fiber internet. But what about other products and services? I know that the LS Network story doesn't just stop with fiber internet. What else does LS Networks have? What are they offering today? What are some other services that are available to your customers?
Yeah, and in general, we're not a product-driven organization, and I don't mean that to sound like a negative thing.
Yeah.
Given the markets we serve, the size of these markets, we're really focused on delivering tested and proven products to customers.
Yeah.
And so what that means is we're really leveraging what the equipment vendors and other technology vendors are developing to really support a broad range of ISPs and other providers. So, we're not bleeding edge ourselves, but we want to adapt and think about how we can do that. So I think it's, it's often about higher bandwidth, lower latency, having resilient networks. So we'll continue to build and deliver on that core mission.
Yeah.
But I think as you talk about what you were saying, what do the customers need, whether it's a commercial as we move into the residential space, it's how do we enable them to manage their connections, to improve their security, make sure they have the right applications and are performing at the right time. So, that it's still voice. I know I talk about voice moving away, but for many businesses, voice is still critical. But also cloud applications or video connections or other things like that.
Right.
So it's really giving them various tools, whether that's, things like SD-WAN, security, cloud connections, some unified communication platforms. I think those are, I would say, the key areas that we layer on top of the internet to make sure the customer has a strong, robust, environment in their office or in their home that allow them to take advantage of things like where we're headed with the metaverse, the video solutions, the applications, all these immersive technologies.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you just mentioned Pocket.net, so now's a great time to talk about that and all the other things you guys are doing. So you acquired a residential service provider, so now that's added to your plate. You also have, I guess the full acquisition was with Comstructure Consulting, so you now have more engineering resources to deliver your services. You have announced expansion plans for some communities in the Pacific Northwest. So what type of expansion is next? What are you guys looking forward to in terms of more expansion? I feel like there's a new announcement every month or so. So I'm anxious to hear what's next. But what's the plan for expansion and delivering and connecting more of these rural communities?
Yeah, well, I think I think geographic expansion is a key piece to our growth, and a key piece to our mission, because if we want to bring better internet to more communities, it often is about expanding and building into those communities. So, on the flip side, this is still a very tough business. It's costly to build fiber into a new community. There's a lot of things that it takes to make that connection a reality for people. So I think there's a few dynamics. So one, the overall grants and other funding sources that have finally kind of been coming through as part of the infrastructure programs and various initiatives, I think are finally going to make it a reality to economically deliver fiber to many areas of this country that have been overlooked from a socioeconomic perspective for a long time. So I think that's great and very exciting. But for us specifically, I think there's a couple elements. So one is, where are I'll call them adjacent towns and communities that we can most efficiently bring better internet connections there to help support them. And so we'll continue to look and evaluate those and find opportunities to branch into that. And part of that, I think, is with the Pocket iNet acquisition and moving in the residential space. We have both, I'll call it the Pocket iNet core footprint, and we are basically going to invest heavily in expanding the fiber footprint in those towns and communities. Pocket iNet, was moving along at a good pace, but had limited funding, and so we'll bring in some additional funding to accelerate the pace of them getting fiber to more communities and more areas that don't have access to that today. And then I think the other piece is bringing that residential offering into the communities that LS Network serves today. When we talk about bridging the digital divide, when we are only focused on, yes, the cell towers, the schools, the hospitals, those are all important things to those communities. But bringing it to to the residential component, I think is where that really helps fulfill the whole mission and making sure people can take advantage of that in their homes and on a daily basis to improve their lives.
Right. That's great. So if we shift the LS Networks hat off for a second and put on the Randy hat, I want to hear from Randy about, maybe what leadership. You're in a new role, you're in a new position. You've been in leadership roles in the past, maybe not at the CEO level, but we're all leaders, in one way or another. So what's a good leadership lesson, if you could leave a nugget for maybe a CEO of another similar company or this CEO right here? What's a good lesson that you've learned in leadership in general?
Yeah, there's so many I've learned. I've been really blessed, to have worked with and around some really great coaches and leaders and people that I've taken a lot from. So let me pause for a second and think about the biggest one. I think it probably comes back to, what we talked about earlier, which is, we're all human beings and we're all part of a team. So I think leaders have to lead through the good and the challenging. And as they do that, remember, these are people involved. It's good to run numbers and spreadsheets and do all that analysis, but there's still the human element that you really have to take into account. So getting the entire team engaged and aligned on the team's objectives and goals, I think is probably the most important piece for success. I've been a part of just a handful of what I call high-performing, high-functioning teams where we collectively achieved amazing things, probably beyond more than what we had expected. And as I've spent time looking back and thinking about those teams and what made, what were all these ingredients that came together at the right time just to make that really happen.
What's the secret? What's the secret?
It's around getting everyone focused on the team's goals.
Right.
Everyone fully focused.
It's not about the individual. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. And so anyway, as a part of that, I think that, it's just remembering that it's the team dynamic, that successes are created by the broader team, share the credit across that team, and just keep trying to build that, right ecosystem, that right collaboration environment, and the right, open communications across that whole team to make sure you're able to get the most out of every person.
I was about to ask you your most memorable career moment and your hardest moment. It might be the same. Do you have, it could be the most memorable in a positive way, and then hardest moment in your career, like your highest high and your lowest low. Do you have an example that you'll be willing to share with us?
When we talk about the highest high, I struggle finding just one. I mean, there's been, like I mentioned earlier, various projects I've been involved with, where there's a specific network milestone that everyone celebrates and talks about. But there's also those times after the fact where you see where the network you've built is, the impact it had because of an unfortunate situation or dynamic. So I think overall, I just think about all the people and the experience, all the people I've met, have passed through my life, and the experiences I've had. So I've met and worked with some amazing people, literally from around the globe. So many stories I can tell that, have become a part of me. So I think really that's, I think about just the opportunity to engage and interact with so many amazing people who I've learned from and understood their culture, but also various technical, business, leadership, you name it.
That's awesome. And you work with some great ones where you are now. I know that,
Absolutely.
I know that for a
Absolutely.
fact. So that's awesome. What about hardest moment in your career? Do you feel like there's a tough moment that you are willing to share?
I was hoping you'd forget about that part.
If you don't want to share it, it's okay. But I feel like, we're all human, so I think it's good to share that.
Again, I think there's plenty of, of stumbles and missteps I've taken along the way. But I think the thing that just kind of comes back to me more than anything is, I mentioned earlier, I've been through the ups and downs of the telecom industry, and through two very rough economic cycles in the past. And I think as a part of that, I saw many good people get laid off, and I was asked to lay off some really good people. And so I think that was always the hardest thing. It's something that you remember. Obviously, I recognize that I was on the, whatever you want to call it, on the opposite side of the table from the other people.
Yeah.
So obviously the impact that it had on their lives was much more significant. So I'm not discounting that, but it's just something that's always stuck with me.
Sure.
And, wanting to run your business in a way where you don't wind up in that situation. Although sometimes circumstances overcome things.
Right. So we'll end on a high note. I won't make you say anything hard again. What about, so you've been August, so that would be 5 months? 5 months in, is that right? What is your best memory so far? I kind of thought about this. I wondered if I could guess what it is, but I don't know if I could. What do you feel like is the highlight of having been there so far?
Yeah, there was the fun day, or 24 hours that we had meetings planned out on the coast of Oregon. So we were out and had some specific appointments and meetings set up, but at the same time, things came together for the Pocket INET close. So literally, probably spent almost 8 hours in the car going to some meetings in the morning and seeing the coast of Oregon, and then driving through the Columbia River Gorge, back up through the Willamette Valley, through the Columbia River Gorge, up into the kind of I'll call them the foothills of mountains, depending on your perspective, of Walla Walla, Washington. So to me, that was just a great memory of like seeing the full broad footprint and geography. But a specific event, I would say, we're a distributed team across our fiber network. We've got nearly 7,000 miles of fiber, of network across the Pacific Northwest. And we got a broad range of people, then skills, different people, different backgrounds that help build our network, to engineer and maintain our network, to the finance and accounting and HR team. So very, very, call it diverse workforce. And so it's really hard to get everyone together at the same time in the same place. So they had a tradition of doing that, kind of, they called it their all hands meeting. And so we were able to do that. I mean, they did it in 2021, but we were able to do it in 2022 again, where we brought in an all hands meeting, which included the comm structure team that we literally had just acquired the day before. getting a collection of people from Pocket INET who were able to make the long trip down from Walla Walla to join us, as well as virtually almost all of our colleagues spread across our footprint. So really getting everyone together there, in one room, seeing all these people with different backgrounds, different living in different locations to interact, engage with each other, bond, connect, and share stories. So to me, that is, for at this stage, I would say the most memorable moment, just really powerful, energizing for me, and hopefully for everyone else, about our path and our journey. And we talked about our theme for 2023 and focusing on our goals and setting us up for success. So that was a phenomenal day for me.
That's awesome. Well, I know you've made quite an impact so far. I feel like there's been a lot going on since you started. I don't know if that's because of you or it was the momentum had started and you came and then all of these other things started happening, but you're off to a great start. I know if anyone's looking to learn more about LS Networks, I won't make you tell them. I can tell them. They can go to lsnetworks.net. They can find you on all social media channels, and you personally are pretty active on LinkedIn. So if there's anybody that's in the industry or that's a business leader that wants to connect with Randy, I know he's active on LinkedIn and he won't ignore you. So any other memories or moments or anything you want to leave with? Any insight that you want to leave as we close?
I think you've covered all the bases very thoroughly, so I don't have anything else to add.
Okay. Well, I appreciate you as just an industry friend, and what you guys are doing at LS Networks is really incredible. I've, been witness to seeing a lot of growth in the last year since I've gotten to know the whole team, and really excited to see what happens in 2023. So thank you for being on the podcast.
Thank you.